Hi, Revive. This is Pastor SooSang here, and I want to offer you yet another insight on Sabbath rest from Tim Keller's book, Every Good Endeavor. It's a book about work, but of course he's also going to offer you some wisdom and insight about Sabbath and rest. So here he's exploring the passage that we have been looking at on Sabbath keeping from Deuteronomy chapter 5. So he says, Deuteronomy 5 ties the observance of Sabbath to God's redemption. Verse 15 says, remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. God portrays the Sabbath day as a reenactment of emancipation from slavery. In one of my messages, I talked about liberation, emancipation, liberation. It reminds us how he delivered his people from a condition in which they were not human beings, but simply units of capacity in Pharaoh's brick production system. Anyone who cannot obey God's command to observe the Sabbath is a slave, even a self-imposed one. Your own heart, or our materialistic culture, or an exploitative organization, or all of the above. And of course, since we live in Silicon Valley, it very often is all of the above. There's you, our materialistic culture, incredibly materialistic here in Silicon Valley, and then you probably work for a company that's driving you more than it probably should. Will be abusing you if you do not have the ability to be disciplined in your practice of Sabbath. Sabbath is therefore a declaration of our freedom. It means you are not a slave, not to your culture's expectations or your family's hopes, your medical school's demands, not even to your own insecurities. It is important that you learn to speak this truth to yourself with a note of triumph. Otherwise, you will feel guilty for taking time off, or you'll be unable to truly unplug. So if you just think this is this religious idea that I better do this, but the real important thing going on is the work that I'm supposed to do, well, if that's real life, then really you're just a real slave. But if Jesus has really won and redeemed us from the enslavement to the pharaohs of the Egypt of this life, then there has to be a note of triumph. And then you can say, no, this is more important. Jesus has really been my victor, one greater than Moses. He goes on to say this. The Sabbath legislation in Israel was enacted after the Exodus from Egypt. It was unique among world cultures at the time. It limited work, profit-taking, exploitation, and economic production in general. So in other words, it's actually really good for justice. It's really good for mercy to our neighbors. Every seventh day, no work could be done in the fields, and every seventh year the field was to remain fallow and not to be cultivated at all. This surely meant that in the short run, Israel was less economically productive and prosperous than its neighbors, but it was a land of free people. In the long run, of course, a deeply rested people are far more productive. I want to say something. I didn't say too much about this in my message, but Sabbath is a gift for your neighbors. It's a gift for the business community. If you own a business, or if you're a boss or a manager, not only should you take Sabbath, do you understand that you should give that Sabbath to your workers too? Those people underneath your authority. Because you think, I'm going to take the day off, but on my Sabbath day, I'm just going to make my underlings really work like slaves really hard. And then, our business will be really, really good. No, that isn't the point. That means you're treating them like, how do you put it? Not as human beings, but as units of capacity in Pharaoh's brick production system. And you're being the evil Pharaoh. No, we have to treat our neighbors this way, and so offer rest, and then all other people in our society, they can also have this movement and be truly human. They can work, and then they can have rest, and then as they become more deeply rested people, over the long haul, in the short term, if we're just greedy and constantly thinking of the short term and the treadmill of the success of the short term, then then yes, we're going to treat our neighbors and yourself this way. But if you can really understand and have the deeper wisdom that as we have this cycle of work and rest and not treat our neighbors or ourselves like slaves, then we should give this rest to our, to your businesses, to your students, to your little league baseball team, all these other things. There has to be a time of stop. And so, brothers and sisters, wherever you are, where you have leadership, maybe you're a mother and father, please don't make your kids work 7 days a week. Maybe you are the manager in your business or you're the owner of your business. There needs to be a stop. And so please do not become the Pharaoh. Do not be the Pharaoh of your own mind. Offer a justice-filled mercy and rest for your family, for your business, for your neighbors. And then over time, trust that you're going to reap a longer, far deeper and greater kind of productivity over the long haul as we receive and follow after this blessing and wisdom from God.